Hello everybody and welcome to my 5th developer log video for my now named game, Wayward. As you can see, Wayward 1.1 is now out and ready for everybody to go and try. As you can see, I have an awesome new song by Oddmund Strømme. It's kind of a mellow or slightly depressing track, which kind of matches the feeling I want to give to the player from the starting of the game. Kind of like hopelessness and despair, which may get a little bit lighter as the player progresses. Like with any release, this has tons of bug fixes and performance issue fixes, which is always kind of a hard thing to do because as soon as you add something, something else breaks, which unfortunately is the case with this release. There is some known issues, especially with people on Macs not loading the map correctly, which I'm still looking into. The player now starts with a couple random items, which is different from the last one where you just kind of started with a shovel. And speaking back about the map, it is now a static map. I basically removed the procedural generation, basically because I wasn't happy enough with the variety or how it worked or how it felt in terms of gameplay and game mechanics. So I'm going to look back into adding that again in the future, but for right now it's kind of a static map, including some cool areas like a dungeon and a cave, and if you look around enough you'll also find treasure. Also, like in every release, there's tons of more equipment, more items, more enemies, more sound effects, more crafting recipes, and more environments or tiles. This will probably be the case for pretty much every release that I do. Monsters now have corpses, which can be carved for resources. In the case of this release, it's pretty much meat only. If you carve a bear or a rabbit or a rat, you can get some tasty meat to eat. Another thing that was missing from the previous version was an ability to rest, which I've added in for use with the leaf bedroll that you start out with. Another way to just pass time without sleeping is the ability to skip a turn or wait using the spacebar, and you can hold it down to skip as many turns as you want, just in rapid succession. There's now a little bit better support for lower resolutions. I'm still kind of working on the overall interface and design of the layout, so in future versions this might change to actually be supported on any device, no matter how big or how small. Dialogue and window positions now save locations on your browser, so if you refresh the page or come back later, all the positions of those dialogues will stay. Unfortunately, something else I was missing in this release was the ability to minimize the windows instead of just closing them and having them never come back, which is pretty stupid on my part. This method does use an HTML5 feature called local storage, so it won't necessarily work on every browser, but most of the modern ones will have that feature. And I'm actually going to use this method for doing things like saving progress and actually saving the game, which isn't in this version, obviously, but will be there soon. If you paid close enough attention to the last version in combat, it wasn't necessarily very good. There wasn't delay between fighting, so like when you attack, the monster would attack right away, and it kind of made a mismatch of kind of sound effects and particle effects and stuff like that. So now there's some nice delay, especially when you're fighting a group of, say, 3 monsters and they all kind of attack you. It's a little bit more fleshed out now. You now have the ability to throw things like rocks and other projectiles that you make, which is good if you're kind of running away and don't want to get hurt by your attacker. You can just look behind you and chuck a couple rocks at him. Another big change in the game is the removal of intelligence and the addition of hunger, which basically adds a food clock to the game, which harkens back to the idea that you really are trying to survive in this environment and world, and it makes you actually need to find things like mushrooms and plants to maybe grow so you can kind of store them for later. There's now tooltips implemented in the game which are basically hover effects, so when you hover over an item or a crafting item, it will tell you basically what it does or the purpose, or in the case of a crafting item, it will tell you what it takes to actually build it. Hotkeys are now in the game, which allows you to press any one button from 1 to 0 on your keyboard, which will use that order of selected item from your inventory. So for example, 3 on your keyboard will use the third item in your inventory. And the way that you kind of sort and select this is just by dragging and dropping to change the order of items in your inventory. And last but not least, there is now a win mechanic in the game, which is kind of more or less like an Easter egg. It's not something that's going to be staying in the game, just because I would want to eventually having it more open-ended going forward. Anyways, thanks for watching, and if you play it, let me know what you think. Thanks.